Good morning, my friends. Welcome back to Novel Idea. My name is Dia, and today I am doing an original tag by Jack from Spread Book Joy, and it is called The Evolution of a Reader. And I am doing this a little bit out of order of how I've been tagged. I have a couple of other tags that I have been tagged in prior to this one, but I wanted to do this one because it's just kind of a sit down and chat kind of tag, and it has some prompts, but they're more to give you like a guideline of how to go through it. So I just wanted to do this one. I have a semi-quiet house. You'll probably hear some stuff going on outside, but inside right now I have the apartment to myself, which is just odd. This is not normal. My husband works, but he is in and out quite a bit, and right now he's going to be gone for a good solid amount of time. So I am just going to jump in. Okay, so her first prompt here is what you read. How has your taste in books evolved? So my story is kind of backwards, I think, of most people. So I did not have a reading family life growing up. I was read to by my grandma a little bit when I was very young, and I was, of course, read to like nursery rhymes and picture books and those kinds of things. But as far as having an example of somebody who read classics to you, or that would sit down with you throughout the day and have a little time to read a chapter or do that kind of thing, I never had that. My mom was a reader, but she read romance novels. She was a big Harlequin person, and she, of course, I was not allowed to read those. And so I almost always looked at books, other than picture books, as something that was almost taboo. And so I didn't really get into reading until I was in school and teachers were reading to us during lunchtime and all of that kind of thing. So about the time that I was 8 or 9, I picked up my first chapter book, and this kind of set the tone for just about everything that I read up until I was a teenager. And that was books that just ripped your heart out. So the first book that I ever read on my own, picking it up off the shelf and deciding this is a book I want to read, was, is it called Child of the Silent Night? I think that's what it's called. Child of the Silent. I actually have a copy somewhere. Yes. All right. Yes. Child of the Silent Night. And this is, I think, the actual copy. You can see it's pretty water stained. It's an old copy from a school library that they were getting rid of. So this is about another girl, not Helen Keller, but another girl who was born deaf, blind, and mute, and was taught how to acknowledge her world. And it is a heartbreaking novel because parents did not have any clue how to deal with children with disabilities back in this time. And so I read that one. And then I started on a journey of reading lots of other things that ripped my heart out. The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. I read a book called Hansie, which was the story of a young, I believe she was Dutch girl who was chosen to become a Nazi and was put into Hitler's school for youth and grew up, but her mother was a Christian, and so she grew up kind of hating her mother in some ways because her mother loved Jesus and the Nazis were against Jesus. And I read this one. It takes you all the way into adulthood where she marries and just the difficulties that they have and just all of this kind of stuff. So it was a heartbreaking book as well. And then I read a book called Dory, the Girl That Nobody Loved. I had a wonderful childhood in some ways, and in other ways it was a very, very difficult one. And so my reading, I think, at the time was very reflective of how I was feeling as a child. Like that I needed to have kind of empathy from the characters in my books. And so until I was a teenager, that's basically the kind of book that I read. And then when I became a teenager was when I started getting into more of the fantastical. And I read Lord of the Rings, and I read The Hobbit, and I read the Chronicles of Narnia. I think I was about 14 maybe, and I read Dune. And it quickly became kind of a comfort for me. And again, it was just enough of a sentimental, it was just enough of that kind of rip your heart out, but not quite. And then it just turned into something that I read quite often. And so I kind of left the rip your heart out books behind and moved on into the fantasy kind of realm. I went through a stage when I was a new mom where all I was reading was nonfiction. And I was voracious. I just wanted to learn, and I wanted to find all these things that were unknown to me and find out more about them. And so I read a lot of nonfiction and used to just take notebooks full of note after note after note, and be able to, do annotations and all that kind of stuff in my books. But there came a time, of course, when you are a mom where you don't have as much time to yourself, especially once you have more than one child. And we had all three of our kids pretty quickly. So they're 2 years apart or less. And then we homeschooled. And so then my reading taste went to knowing that the kids were going to have to read things in school, and I wanted to maybe read those things also. And so I would usually read ahead of time whatever it was that their curriculum was asking them to read, especially if I had never read it before. And so I got all kinds of classics in there. I ended up reading so many wonderful middle grade books, which I didn't even do when I was middle grade. And yeah, it was a wonderful season to be reading to go along with what they were learning. And then I went through a short stint of time where I wasn't reading at all. And what got me back into reading once again was Brandon Sanderson, and reading all of his, anything I could get my hands on from him. And also Christopher Paolini's Inheritance Cycle I read, and it really created something in me to want to read a lot more. And so I just started picking up fantasy books again. And it really hasn't changed too much. I still read quite a bit of nonfiction, and I read a lot of fantasy, and I still have left the Rip Your Heart Out books behind. Her next prompt here is how you read. Has the format that you read in changed very much? And the only thing that has really changed in format for me has been that I have given audiobooks a good fair shot. In fact, when I first started my channel, we were on the road and we were moving. I didn't want to take extra things with me in the car when we were having the dog and my husband and I, and you know what we would need. We were going to take our time in moving also. So I uploaded a whole bunch of library audiobooks. Thank goodness for Libby. So that's kind of when I gave audiobooks their fair due. And I still listen to one occasionally, but my preference still is paper books. And so I spend a lot of time going through the library site looking for book recommendations that I get from booktubers and other friends. And then if I cannot find them in a paper copy, then I will use audio. And I do like audio for trips. And I also appreciate audio when I am in the middle of doing something else. And so I will do that. But for the most part, it hasn't changed too much. I have tried e-readers. I cannot do them. My eyes, I get headaches. I just can't do it. So, how much you read? Do you read more, less previously than you did previously? So when I was young, I did not read often, and I did not read a lot. When I became a teenager, I still did not read often, and I would take my time with the books that I had. Then when I went through that nonfiction stage, I not only read a lot, but I read quickly and would go back and reread if I felt like I didn't understand something or didn't quite get a concept or wanted to know more about something that I may have just read too quickly. And so I read and read and read and read all the time. And then when I had kids, of course, I was still reading quite a lot because I had 3 of them, and I wanted to make sure that I was reading everything that all 3 of them were going to have to be reading. And so yeah, I read quite often, and then like I said, I went through a stage where I wasn't reading at all, and getting back into that, it started off slowly, but I was reading very fast still. So the Christopher Paolini series, we went through very fast. In fact, the first one we listened to as an audiobook while we were painting our living room, and all three of the kids and I were doing the painting and taping off and trim work and all of that kind of stuff. And so when we were doing that, we put on the audiobook for Aragon. And so it has special memories for me for that reason also. I ended up reading Brissinger and Inheritance as paper books, and we listened to Aragon and Eldest as we were painting the house. So yeah, it has changed, but I still prefer to read just one right after another of books. I am very much if I am not reading something, I will find something to read. And so, yeah. And then, how has Booktube changed you as a reader? So I answered this question when we were doing our 150 subscriber Q&A, my husband and I said then that I didn't think that it had changed me too much, but I will say that I'm a little bit more similar to what I was when the kids were in school. I'm a little more rigid in what I am reading when I am reading it. So before Booktube, I was still picking up book after book after book after book, but it didn't matter what it was. Whereas now I have buddy reads, and I love those. And I have events like Victober or Nonfiction November or March of the Mammoths or that kind of thing that I want to follow, or Middle Grade March. And if I am doing that, then sometimes I'll save books and wait and put them off a little bit and think, okay, I'm gonna plow through this in March, or I'm gonna plow through this in November, or I'm gonna wait to read this Victorian novel that I have never read before for Victober. And so yes, it has changed me a little bit, but not to the degree that I feel stifled. And I haven't had so many buddy reads or had to, and I don't tend to feel FOMO. So I don't have a fear of missing out very much, unless it is a book that I really wanted to read and I see somebody else's buddy reading it with someone else. And then I'm like, oh, darn it, I totally could have read that with them. But for the most part, I don't really have that. So I only participate as far as I feel like I can. And I don't know, it's probably just because of my age, and I know my limits. And so that's what I've done. So Jack tagged a ton of booktubers on this, and so I'm not going to tag anybody. If you didn't get tagged by Jack and you're watching mine and you want to do this, please do it, and then tag me and let me know that you are doing it so I can come watch. And I am going to leave all of the prompts down in the description box, along with Jack's channel and her video about this. Thank you so much, Jack, for tagging me and for allowing me to be a part of this. I really enjoyed your video and learning more about your own journey, your own evolution, and I look forward to seeing others as they record their videos also. I will see you in the next video, everybody. Like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to. Bye.